I'd like to start off by congratulating the School of Geography on the Athena Swan Award. That's a really tremendous achievement and well-deserved. So I did the MSc in Water Science Policy and Management, or WSPM, as we like to call it. We also called ourselves the Water Babies that year. And we really bonded. I can't speak highly enough of the course. I like to think of it as the second best life decision I've ever made. The first being choosing to marry my husband, who's here today. He's taken. And he's also in the water sector, so you can see that I have a real heart for water. Yes, I'm the Secretary General of the Global Water Leaders Group. I like to think of myself as a secretary in general because we're a small to medium enterprise, so I have to do a lot of things day to day, everything from strategic management right down to making sure our events happen properly, and then everything in between, so making sure our publications go out on time, managing strategic change, and doing some writing and speaking at various events as well. So this is how I've chosen to approach the questions that we were asked as speakers today. Sort of a little bit about myself to start off, how I got to where I am in my career today. The Oxford effect, there's a couple of photos here to show you what my year at Oxford was like. So this was, the big photo was taken just after we finished our exams. And you can see there our course coordinators, Dr. Rob Hope and Mark New, having just as much fun with the champagne as we are, if not more. I think that is a real demonstration of how much fun the year was, as well as, getting serious and actually getting to grips with, I think it was 13 topics that we did throughout the year, plus a thesis, which was pretty jam-packed. And then some of my friends as well on our graduation day, and then just a fun one of another alumna from a different year of the Water Science Masters, who ended up being my boss for a while, which was a lot of fun, and that was taken at the 2012 London Olympic Games with some beers. I got a bit overexcited when I heard about this event, and I've slightly overfilled these slides, so I'll just kind of summarize a little bit. Academically, I'm a little bit of a chameleon. I ended up getting business, humanities, and science at tertiary level. If you haven't already been able to tell, I'm Australian. I grew up in Sydney. I did my undergraduate at the University of Sydney in Arts and Commerce. But when I left secondary school, I was convinced that I was going to go into marketing. I'd fallen in love with business studies, and really the business arts side of things was just going to be a pathway into that. Then I ended up doing an honours year, otherwise known as an undergraduate master's in Australia, and that was more to do with the socio-political communications in the Murray-Darling Basin millennium drought. And I started to see these unexpected interdisciplinary links between, all of the different studies. So, for example, marketing does rely very heavily on the humanities with the consumer behaviour side, and then when I got to the honours side of things, I started to see, sort of marketing in the environment working together, and of course to have a successful water sector you need to have that kind of triple bottom line approach of the financial, the social and the environmental. Before I applied to do the Water Science Masters, I was very apprehensive that I had to be an engineer to be in the water sector. They reassured me that no, they take everyone, which was fantastic news for me because I really didn't have a tertiary science background before then. And so that really encouraged me to work to my strengths and bring what I understood about the world to this geography course here in Oxford. So it's what you make it, is the sort of first little piece of advice. I have reflected throughout my career and my studies, was I just being unfocused, collecting degrees, or was I being interdisciplinary and being a kind of generalist, as we've heard about today as well. And I like to choose to think that it was actually interdisciplinary as opposed to unfocused. I think that it resonates in the fact that in my career, the the jobs that have stuck and the ones that have made the biggest impression on my life have been ones that were not advertised. They were created sort of around my set of skills, or I've made the case for them. So it's about having that confidence to go out and sort of create the jobs. And so there was another alumnus, again, as you can see, I stayed quite plugged into the alumni community here, who recommended to me that we needed to be the pioneers of our generation, that the water sector jobs don't exist yet in the way that they need to, and that we have to go out and show our worth to the sector and show the value that we bring. So again, I've overfilled the slide. I'll skim again. How did I get here? It wasn't a straight line at all, and I think that resonates with some of the other presentations that we've heard today already. So basically, as a child, when I started primary school in 1993-94, I had my first moment of falling in love with water. So we, growing up in Australia, water is very scarce. We had environmental education even in year 3, and our teacher took us off into the corner. We all sat down, and she said, "Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions. You have to give me, sort of your most honest answers and why." And so the first question was, should you, if you're trying to conserve water, have a shower or a bath? And my hand shot up, and typical nerd, and I said, "Oh, shower, definitely shower." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, obviously it uses less water." And she was like, "Well, it depends how long your shower is." And my mind was just blown. And I started to see, like, as a child, the grey area that existed in geography, and I was captivated. And then she asked a lot more questions, and I became that irritating child who always made us get up and put the buckets outside to catch the rainwater and sort of conserve it for a non-rainy day. And so, I kind of developed that sort of love of water and the environment over time. It restarted, as I said, in my undergraduate masters. Then I came here, which was, as I say, the second best life decision I've ever made. It was just, I wouldn't know where to start to say how wonderful it was. The variety of the courses, the quality of the teaching, obviously, the practical nature of everything, which I'll get to in a minute. But yeah, that was a real turning point for me. And then the week after I handed in my thesis, I was exhausted and a little hungover, and I applied for a job at a local business called Global Water Intelligence, which some of you may have heard of if you are looking for jobs at the moment. I kind of tripped over and fell into a short-term research job there. I was actually interviewed by another alumna from the Water Science Masters, and that lasted for 4 days. It's not as unsuccessful as it sounds, because after the end of that week, they remembered that I had a business degree, and so I was transferred to what was then the internal consulting team. And then I had to sort of change colours again, sort of chameleon water person, and I was working on sort of water treatment technology markets for the unconventional oil and gas sector in Queensland and North America, and also on things like flood pump management technology markets in China. That was before the Sponge Cities policy has come in. I don't know if anyone is working on Chinese flood management policy at the moment. Okay, no. But then I got transferred again after 6 months to cover a maternity contract on the events team. As you can see, a small to medium enterprise, all hands on deck. And so after that point, the owner of Global Water Intelligence decided that he wanted to revive his idea from a few years ago, before I had joined the company, to start a non-profit organisation for altruistic motives to really help the public sector to understand its worth, but also the value of water, and how to improve its services as well, because everybody needs clean, safe water. And so we trialled some events in 2012 where we would invite CEOs of water and wastewater utilities, ministers, high-level people from the World Bank, the IFC, etc., to come along, and we had 3 events. There was one in Rome, one in Singapore, and one in Chicago. And we found there was a real appetite amongst the leaders at the strategic level to really kind of think across boundaries, geographical, like actually geographical boundaries. You can imagine they use the phrase geography. It's fantastic. Yeah, you know, the utilities often think to the edge of their infrastructure, you know, the edge of their pipelines. Sometimes they're actually regulated to do that, and so they were rarely in the habit of picking up the phone to talk to the next utility leader over and sort of share the innovations amongst themselves. And so that had actually led to, over several decades, an underperforming water sector, which was not up to par when you compare it to like-minded sectors like energy and telecommunications. So we actually registered a new non-profit organisation called the Global Water Leaders Group in January 2013 to address that problem. So we have had about, I think, 18 CEO-level meetings now. They've been growing steadily from about the 15 or so people we had at the first one to about 70 or 80 now from you know, sort of 50 countries at a time. And it's really interesting to hear all the best practice that they're really implementing in their various locations, and then sort of seeing their eyes sparkle when they understand someone else's story and how they could adapt it to their own local situation. So it's rather than us going out and talking to them and telling them what to do with their organisations, it's actually that peer-to-peer networking that has been really valuable. So for a long time as well in this role, I was a Water Leader magazine editor. So that went out to a wider group of people than who could come to the events, so that we would disseminate all of that best practice knowledge worldwide to about 3,000 CEOs of utilities and ministers as well. We've since been through a period of strategic change, which has led to a white paper series that we're now engaged with, which allows us to go into a lot more deep dive topics that are specifically of interest to the utility leaders themselves. So yes, again, in the same way that I was, you know, an arts person, a business person, a science person in my studies, now I'm a river person, a utilities person, and an industrial person. So it's about sort of staying flexible across those sort of parts of the water sector for me. One of the points that I wanted to make here as well is that along the road, I've tried to think about it as a career, not just a job. So, you know, sort of going out and seeing those opportunities. What can I write? Where can I speak? You know, sort of how to engage more widely than your day-to-day job actually allows you to. So the Oxford effect, thinking back to those photos. So the first thing that I remembered from coming to the course was Dr. Rob Hope saying, you know, we're not trying to make you experts in absolutely every single one of these 13 topics, at which point we all breathed a sigh of relief. And so the output was meant to be that we were going to be good managers at the end. So even though I still don't understand those hydrogeology, you know, formulas. I can understand what questions to ask about aquifers, and you know, it's kind of being able to see across the different areas of study. And it reminded me actually of one of the mottos from DC Water, which is one of our members in the US, you know, sort of everything, everywhere, all the time. So, you know, my mind is kind of thinking back constantly to what I got from the Water Science Masters in my day-to-day job, which is really useful. The practical attitude of the really stood out for me. So we went on countless field trips, and we had loads of fantastic speakers come, which really made everything jump off the page for me. So John Beddington was one, and you know, sort of hearing about his work was really inspiring. And of course, we went to Spain to the Ebro River Basin, which was really everything from the socio-political nature of water to dams and desalination. It was really mind-blowing. The discipline diversity, of course, is what we're here to celebrate today, as well as the gender equality. You know, sort of being in a course, we were only 23 people in our course, so we all got to know each other very well, but more than half of us were women. So it was really important for me to feel like the female voice was being heard and at an equal volume. So that's actually played out the whole year through, which was fantastic. The discipline diversity was something I touched on earlier as well, where you know, everyone was coming from a slightly different background, like today, for example. So there was me from business, we had lawyers, we had fisheries, we had, you know, a whole different range of things, so everyone could get involved in different subjects, which was fantastic. SoGE's, I like to call it SoGE because it sounds like water. SoGE's career influence for me. So getting started, as I said, I was hired by a WUSPM alumna. I currently, you know, I'm very plugged into the alumni network. You know, every time I catch up with my friends from my year group, you know, they've spoke at my wedding, I've spoken at theirs, you know, they come and stay. Then they're a constant source of inspiration, and we're constantly nerding out with each other over whatever we're doing in the water sector at that time. Mentorship, one of the professors in the department is actually one of my mentors, which is fantastic. And friends for life as well, which I've touched on. So what can I add, if anything, to the advice that has been shared already today? Someone, I think Nicola mentioned imposter syndrome. So when I first arrived for the induction day here, actually in the Herbertson room where we were earlier, I was just, in the back of my mind, I was just sure that I wasn't meant to be here, that they'd made a mistake with my application. And then someone else said that to me about themselves. And I said, oh, I was thinking that. And then someone else chimed in, and then we were all like, well, we might all be right. But we hope we're all wrong. And at that point, we sort of all relaxed and just kind of got on with it and had a fantastic year. Be prepared to be flexible in your focus. So, you know, as we know, if you're a water person, the jobs don't necessarily exist yet. So be confident and go out and, you know, make of it what you can and what you want it to be. Attend as many events as possible and network. So being here today is a good start. Discover the people you respect and ask them to be your mentors. There's no rules with mentorship as such, so you can have as many or as few as you want. Of course, when choosing them, I would recommend a diversity amongst them. So depending on your focus, you know, sort of choose one, maybe an academic, maybe one in law, maybe one in, you know, water or wherever, that can give you different perspectives and sort of give you a check every now and then. Never stop reading, always be learning, and build your professional, personal development first. So as we've heard today, you know, sort of keeping your eye on the prize, on the big things that you value, rather than just sort of going day to day and sort of dealing with the minutiae. Don't stop having ideas. If you don't create things, they won't exist. So if there are any entrepreneurs in the room, I know some people are self-employed as well. So I would encourage you to sort of explore your ideas to the fullest. And there's a link there for the Oxford Innovation Network as well. I also know someone there if you need to have the confidence to talk to someone with a friendly face. Pippa is lovely. And always, of course, remember that the future is interdisciplinary. You can be an environmental and a geography chameleon. As I said, it's what you make it. Stay plugged into SoGE. Seek out startup, you know, policies, professional organisations, competitions, whatever it is that helps your personal professional career to develop. And finally, maintain your sense of humour, stay grounded and know your worth. I have been reflecting on a piece of poetry. I know this is not geography at all, but in sort of thinking about this idea of, you know, sort of celebrating the female alumni and also the current students and the staff and whatnot, I found this poem, and I'd like to read it to you. It's very short, I promise. And it goes like this. And one day she discovered that she was fierce and strong and full of fire, and that not even she could hold herself back because her passion burned brighter than her fears. So I would encourage us after today, when we leave the School of Geography and Environment, hopefully not for the last time, that we would go forth and let our fires burn bright and never hold back. So thank you.